The acrid smell of fuel and rotting food hit Commander Vell's senses as she stepped into Kara Station. The border outpost was a cacophony of alien voices, hissing hydraulics, and clanging metal, a perfect cover for the kind of business she needed to conduct. Her blue-scaled fingers wrapped tighter around the small pouch at her side, feeling the weight of the data crystal within. The information it contained could either save the Azuran Empire or destroy everything her people had built. Vele pushed through the crowd of traders, smugglers, and mercenaries that filled the station's main corridor. Her silver military uniform marked her as Azuran High Command, drawing suspicious glances from several species who had little love for her empire. She kept her head high, her white hair catching the harsh fluorescent lighting as she made her way toward the cantina, where she'd arranged to meet her potential escort. The cantina was dimmer than the corridors filled with smoke from various alien substances, and the low murmur of conversations in a dozen different languages. Vela scanned the room, looking for her contact. According to the information broker, the human went by the name Wyatt, a former Earth Special Forces operative turned freelance mercenary. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic community, having only achieved faster-than-light travel within the last century. Most Azurans considered them primitive, barely evolved beyond their barbaric past. She spotted him in a corner booth, exactly as described: tall, lean with dark hair, and eyes that seemed to take in everything while revealing nothing. He wore simple black tactical gear, and Vele could see the outline of several weapons beneath his jacket. As she approached, he looked up from his drink, some kind of amber liquid that smelled vaguely toxic to her enhanced senses. "Commander Vela, I presume," Wyatt said, his voice carrying a slight accent that marked him as coming from one of Earth's northern continents. He gestured to the seat across from him. "You're looking for passage through the Crimson Belt." Vele settled into the seat, keeping her movements precise and controlled. "That's correct. I need someone who won't ask questions and can handle themselves if things get complicated." "Things always get complicated in the Crimson Belt," Wyatt replied, taking a sip of his drink. "That's Razorfang territory. Most species consider them apex predators for a reason. What makes you think you need to go there badly enough to risk becoming their dinner?" "That's my business," Vel said curtly. "The question is whether you're capable of getting me through alive." Wyatt leaned back, studying her with those dark human eyes. "I've been through the belt 17 times, lost 2 ships, but I'm still breathing. That should tell you something about my capabilities." "And your fee?" 50,000 credits. Half up front, half when we reach the other side." Vele considered this. It was expensive, but she had authorization to draw on Imperial emergency funds. "Agreed. But I have conditions. We leave within 6 hours, and you're not to examine or interfere with any cargo I bring aboard." "Fair enough," Wyatt said, extending his hand in the human gesture of agreement. Vele hesitated for a moment. Physical contact between species was still uncommon in Azuran culture, but she grasped his hand briefly. His skin was warm, rougher than her scales, and she noticed the raised scars across his knuckles. "My ship's at Docking Bay 7. We'll depart as soon as you're ready." Vele made her way back through the station, purchasing some basic supplies and checking her encrypted communications one last time. No word from her contacts in the Imperial Council. She hoped that meant the situation hadn't deteriorated further, but with Elder Thalas and his faction growing stronger each day, she couldn't be certain. The data crystal she carried contained evidence of a conspiracy that went to the very heart of the Azuran government, proof that certain council members were planning to not only maintain their isolationist policies, but to actively sabotage any attempts at peaceful cooperation with other species. The human ship was smaller than she'd expected, a sleek courier vessel that looked like it had seen better days. Wyatt was waiting for her at the gangplank, having changed into a full combat suit that highlighted just how different human physiology was from her own. Where Azurans were tall and willowy, built for grace and precision, humans seemed compact and dense, all muscle and bone designed for endurance. "Welcome aboard the Wanderer," he said, leading her up the ramp. "Crew quarters are through that hatch. The cargo bay is aft if you need to store anything. I'd recommend strapping down for departure. I like to leave fast and without much warning." Vele nodded, making her way to the quarters he'd indicated. The room was Spartanly appointed but clean, with a small bunk storage locker and a viewport that currently showed the metal walls of the docking bay. She secured her personal items and the small case that contained the data crystal, then made her way to what she assumed was the bridge. The command deck was cramped, but efficient, every surface covered with controls displays and instruments she didn't recognize. Wyatt was in the pilot's seat, his hands moving over the controls with practiced ease. "Departure in 30 seconds, he announced without looking at her. "Might want to grab something." Vele braced herself against a bulkhead, just as the ship's engines roared to life. The Wanderer shot out of the docking bay with enough force to press her against the wall. Through the main screen, she watched Kara's station shrink away rapidly as they headed for open space. "Next stop, the Crimson Belt," Wyatt said, engaging the autopilot and turning to face her. "Journey time is approximately 18 hours. I'd recommend getting some rest while you can. Once we hit the belt, things get interesting." As if summoned by his words, an alarm began sounding somewhere deep in the ship. Wyatt's expression immediately went from casual to alert, his hands flying over the controls. "What is it?" Vale asked, moving closer to look at the displays. "Someone sabotaged the hyperdrive motivator," Wyatt said grimly, his voice tight with concentration. "We're dropping out of FTL in the middle of nowhere, and I'm reading massive system failures across the board." The ship shuddered violently, and Vela could feel artificial gravity fluctuating. Through the view screen, the star-streaked tunnel of hyperspace collapsed into normal space, revealing an orange-red planet hanging in the darkness ahead of them. "That's Calaris," Wyatt said, fighting with the controls as the ship bucked and shuddered around them. "Jungle world, minimal atmosphere processing, and home to some of the galaxy's most unfriendly wildlife. We're going down whether we like it or not." Vele felt her stomach drop as the planet rushed toward them. "Can you control the descent?" "Barely," Wyatt replied through gritted teeth. "Hang on." The next few minutes were a nightmare of screaming metal, flashing warning lights, and the terrible sensation of falling. Wyatt somehow managed to level out their descent enough that when the Wanderer slammed into the jungle canopy of Calaris, it was more of a crash landing than total annihilation. Vele picked herself up from where the impact had thrown her, her ears ringing and her vision blurry. She could smell smoke and feel heat coming from somewhere deeper in the ship. Wyatt was already up checking systems and grabbing equipment from storage compartments. "Ship's a total loss," he announced. "Life support's failing and we've got fires in 3 sections. We need to get out now." He handed her a field pack and what looked like a military ration kit. "Hope you're ready for a hike, Commander. We're about 800 kilometers from the nearest settlement, and that's assuming it's still there." They evacuated the ship just as the first section exploded behind them. Vele felt the heat wash over her back as they ran into the dense jungle that surrounded the crash site. The air was thick and humid, filled with strange sounds and unfamiliar smells. Plants she'd never seen before towered overhead, their leaves a riot of colors that seemed to shift in the dappled light filtering through the canopy. "This way," Wyatt said, consulting a handheld device. "There's a river about 2 clicks northeast. We can follow it downstream toward civilization." As they walked, Vale found herself studying her human companion more closely. He moved through the jungle with a fluidity that surprised her, seeming to instinctively know where to step to avoid making noise or disturbing the local wildlife. His gear was well maintained but clearly worn from use, and she noticed he carried more weapons than most mercenaries would consider necessary. "You seem remarkably calm for someone whose ship just exploded," she observed, after they'd been walking for an hour. Wyatt glanced back at her, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Not my first crash, Commander. Probably won't be my last, assuming we get off this rock. What about you? Most Azurans I've met don't exactly seem built for wilderness survival." Vele felt a flash of irritation at the casual prejudice in his words, but she supposed it was fair enough. Most of her people did prefer cities and starships to primitive worlds like this one. "I'm full military trained," she said. "I can handle myself." "Good to know," Wyatt replied, then suddenly held up a hand for silence. They froze, listening. At first, Vela heard nothing beyond the normal sounds of the jungle insects, buzzing distant bird calls, the rustle of leaves in the breeze. Then she caught it, a low, rhythmic sound that seemed to be coming from multiple directions at once. "Stalkers," Wyatt whispered slowly, reaching for one of his weapons. "Pack hunters. They've been following us for the last 10 minutes. Vele felt her heart rate spike. She'd heard of Calaris stalkers, six-legged predators with chameleonic skin that could blend perfectly with their surroundings. "How many?" "At least 4, maybe more," Wyatt replied, his voice barely audible. "They'll try to separate us, pick us off one at a time. Stay close, and whatever happens, don't run." The attack came without warning. One moment they were standing in a seemingly empty clearing, and the next, the air around them erupted with movement. The stalkers were exactly as described, about the size of large dogs, but built like predatory cats with razor-sharp claws and teeth designed for tearing flesh. Their skin shifted color constantly, making them nearly invisible, except when they moved. Wyatt's response was immediate and brutal. His weapon, some kind of rapid-fire energy rifle, spat blue-white bolts that lit up the jungle. 2 stalkers dropped immediately, their camouflage failing as they died. A third leaped at Vel from her left, and she barely managed to draw her sidearm in time to put 3 shots into its chest. The remaining stalkers scattered, disappearing back into the jungle as quickly as they'd appeared. "Not bad for a pampered Azuran officer," Wyatt said with approval, checking her shots. "Clean grouping, good instincts." Vele felt a surge of pride despite herself. "I did graduate top of my class from the Imperial War College." "Good thing," Wyatt replied, reloading his weapon. "Because according to my scanner, we've got bigger problems heading our way." The device in his hand was beeping frantically, showing several large heat signatures approaching from the south. As they watched, the readings grew larger and closer. "What kind of bigger problems?" Vela asked, though she was afraid she already knew the answer. Wyatt's face had gone pale beneath his weathered tan. "The kind that makes stalkers look like house pets. We need to move now." They ran through the jungle, branches and thorns tearing at their clothes and exposed skin. Behind them, Vel could hear something crashing through the undergrowth, something massive and moving fast. The sound of trees breaking and the ground shaking under heavy footsteps drove them forward even faster. "There," Wyatt pointed to a rocky outcropping ahead. "We can make a stand there." They scrambled up the rocks just as their pursuer burst into the clearing below. Vela's blood ran cold as she got her first look at a razor fang in person. The creature was enormous, easily 4 meters tall at the shoulder, with an elongated skull full of teeth that looked like they could bite through starship hull plating. Its hide was covered in natural armor plating, and its 4 eyes glowed with an intelligence that was somehow more terrifying than simple animal hunger. "I thought razor fangs were solitary hunters," Vel whispered. "They are," Wyatt replied grimly. "Which means this one isn't hunting. It's defending territory. We must have stumbled into its domain when we crashed." The razor fang paced around the base of the rocks, its massive head swiveling back and forth as it tested the air with nostrils the size of dinner plates. It knew they were up there, but the angle of the rocks made them difficult to reach. That didn't stop it from trying, however. The creature reared up on its hind legs, its claws raking deep gouges in the stone as it tried to climb up to them. "My rifle won't even scratch that hide," Wyatt said, checking his weapon. "And I'm guessing your sidearm won't do much either." Vele looked down at the massive predator and felt despair creeping in. Everything she'd heard about razor fangs suggested they were essentially invulnerable to small arms fire. Some military units had taken them down with vehicle-mounted weapons, but even then it usually required sustained fire from multiple sources. "There has to be something we can do," she said. Wyatt was quiet for a moment, studying the creature below. There was something different about his expression, a calculating look that made Vel suddenly wonder what kind of special forces he'd really been part of back on Earth. "Actually," he said slowly, "there might be, but you're not going to like it." Before she could ask what he meant, Wyatt was moving. Instead of climbing higher up the rocks away from the razor fang, he was climbing down directly toward the massive predator. "What are you doing?" Vela hissed, but he was already too far away to stop. The razor fang noticed his movement, immediately spinning around to face this new threat. For a moment, human and monster stared at each other across a distance of maybe 10 meters. Then Wyatt did something that made Vel's blood freeze in her veins. He dropped his rifle and began walking toward the razor fang with empty hands. The creature seemed as surprised as she was. It cocked its massive head to one side, almost curious about this small being that wasn't running away. Its lips pulled back in what might have been a snarl, revealing teeth like sword blades. Then Wyatt moved. What happened next defied everything Vela knew about physics, biology, and basic common sense. Wyatt didn't just run toward the razor fang, he launched himself through the air with enough force to leave cracks in the stone where he'd been standing. The distance between him and the creature disappeared in the space of a heartbeat. The razor fang tried to react, its head swiveling toward this unexpected aerial assault, but Wyatt was already inside its reach. His hands, ordinary human hands that had shaken hers just hours ago, grabbed hold of the creature's lower jaw and upper skull. And then he pulled. The sound that filled the jungle was like nothing Vela had ever heard, a horrible wet tearing accompanied by the crack of bone and cartilage giving way. The razor fang, the apex predator of an entire planet, the creature that could shrug off military-grade weapons fire, simply came apart in Wyatt's hands. Blood and viscera splattered across the rocks as he literally tore the creature's head in half his hands, moving with mechanical precision to separate vertebrae and split the massive skull down the middle. The body convulsed once, then collapsed in a heap of twitching flesh and pooling blood. Wyatt stood in the center of the carnage, breathing hard, but seemingly uninjured. His hands were covered in the creature's blood up to his elbows, and there was a strange shimmer around his body like heat waves, but more focused and intense. Vele stared down at him in absolute shock. She tried to speak, but found her voice had completely left her. The human she'd hired as a simple escort had just ripped an apex predator apart with his bare hands like it was made of paper. Wyatt looked up at her, and for a moment his eyes seemed to glow with an inner light. Then the shimmer around him faded, and he was just a man again. A man standing in a pool of alien blood, with a thoughtful expression on his face. "You can come down now," he said calmly. "I don't think anything else is going to bother us for a while." Vele climbed down the rocks on shaking legs. As she got closer, she could see that the razor fang was indeed completely dead, its body torn open in ways that should have required heavy machinery to accomplish. The stench of blood and alien pheromones was overwhelming, but underneath it, she detected something else, a metallic smell that seemed to be coming from Wyatt himself. "How?" she managed to ask. Wyatt was wiping his hands on a piece of the creature's hide, not meeting her eyes. "Earth humans are stronger than most species realize," he said simply. "That's impossible," Vale said. "I've seen the physical assessments. Human strength ratings are only marginally above baseline for bipedal species. You just—" "I know what I just did," Wyatt interrupted. He finally looked at her, and she saw something in his expression, wariness, maybe even fear. "The question is what you're going to do about it." Vele stared at him for a long moment. Part of her wanted to demand answers, to interrogate him about what she'd just witnessed. But another part of her, the part that had spent the last several months uncovering lies and conspiracies within her own government, recognized the look in his eyes. It was the look of someone carrying secrets they never asked for. "I'm going to thank you for saving our lives," she said finally. "And then, I'm going to ask if you're still willing to help me complete my mission." Something in Wyatt's posture relaxed slightly. "What mission would that be, Commander? And don't tell me it's just passenger transport. No one pays 50,000 credits to cross the Crimson Belt for sightseeing. Vele glanced around the jungle clearing. The Razorfang's blood was already attracting insects, and she could hear movement in the trees around them. This wasn't the place for revelations, but given what she'd just witnessed, perhaps it was time for some honesty. "I'm carrying intelligence about a conspiracy within the Azuran High Council," she said. "Information that could prevent a war between my people and the galactic community. People are trying to stop me from delivering it." "People like whoever sabotaged my ship," Wyatt said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." He nodded slowly. "All right then. Let's get you to wherever you need to go. But first, we need to put some distance between us and this mess. The scent of Razorfang blood travels for kilometers, and there are scavengers on this planet that make stalkers look friendly." They gathered their gear and left the bloody clearing behind, following a game trail that led roughly in the direction of the nearest settlement. As they walked, Vale found herself stealing glances at her human companion. Everything she thought she knew about Earth's people had just been turned upside down. The Azuran Empire's first contact with humanity had been less than impressive. The humans' ships were crude by galactic standards, their technology decades behind even the youngest spacefaring civilizations. Their worlds were polluted and overpopulated, their societies fractured by countless petty conflicts. Most Azurans viewed them as barely worthy of acknowledgement, useful perhaps as cheap labor or cannon fodder, but hardly equals in any meaningful sense. But if Wyatt was any indication, there was far more to humanity than anyone realized. The strength he displayed wasn't just superhuman. It was beyond what should have been possible for any organic being, without significant technological enhancement. And yet she'd detected no cybernetics, no obvious implants or modifications. "You're thinking very loudly over there," Wyatt said without turning around. "If you have questions, you might as well ask them." "What are you?" Vela asked bluntly. "Because whatever you are, you're not a normal human." Wyatt was quiet for a moment, then stopped walking. When he turned to face her, his expression was serious. "I am human," he said. "But Earth humans aren't what the rest of the galaxy thinks we are. Your people and the others, you all evolved on worlds with standard gravity, standard atmospheric pressure, standard everything. Earth is different." "Different how?" "Higher gravity, denser atmosphere, more radiation from our star, harsher weather patterns, more aggressive predator species." He resumed walking, but his pace was slower now, more contemplative. "For millions of years, our ancestors had to be stronger, faster, more resilient just to survive. The galaxy assumes we're weak because our technology was primitive when you found us. But our bodies..." He flexed one blood-stained hand. "Our bodies are built for a world that would kill most galactic species within hours." Vele absorbed this information, fitting it together with what she already knew about human history. Earth had been surveyed by Azuran scouts decades before first contact, but those surveys had been cursory at best. No one had thought to conduct detailed biological assessments of the native species. "But that still doesn't explain what I just saw," she said. "Enhanced strength is one thing, but you moved faster than physics should allow. And that shimmer around you..." Wyatt stopped again, and this time there was definitely fear in his eyes. "You really want to know, because once I tell you, there's no going back. The galaxy isn't ready for this information. Hell, most humans aren't ready for it." Vale thought about the data crystal in her pack, about the secrets that had already cost so many lives, about the conspiracy that could tear apart the fragile peace between species, about everything she'd risked to bring the truth to light. "I need to know," she said. Wyatt nodded slowly. "The thing about Earth's higher gravity and harsh conditions, it didn't just make us stronger, it made us desperate. Humans have always been good at finding ways to survive, to adapt, to become more than we were before. About 200 years ago, our military discovered something. A way to enhance human physiology at the cellular level, to unlock potential that was always there but dormant. Genetic modification, More than that, quantum enhancement at the molecular level. They called it the Genesis Project. The idea was to create soldiers who could operate in any environment against any enemy. Super soldiers, you might say. Vele felt a chill run down her spine. And you're one of these enhanced soldiers? Was, Wyatt corrected. The program was shut down after some incidents. Too many subjects couldn't handle the process. Too many went insane or worse. The survivors were given new identities and encouraged to disappear. Most of us ended up as mercenaries or private military contractors. Easier to hide what we are out here in the frontier. How many of you are there? Not enough to matter, Wyatt said bitterly. And few enough that we can pretend it never happened. Earth's government denies the program ever existed. The galaxy assumes we're just lucky primitives who stumbled into space travel. And we let them think that. Vela found herself reassessing everything she thought she knew about human expansion into galactic space. The speed with which Earth had established trade relationships, the surprising competence of human mercenaries and soldiers, the way human corporations had managed to carve out market niches that older civilizations had overlooked. Your people have been deliberately hiding your capabilities, she said. Wouldn't you? Wyatt asked. Look what happened when the Azurans revealed they had superior military technology. Half the galaxy either wanted to conquer you or be conquered by you. Humans learned early that it's better to be underestimated than feared. They resumed walking the jungle around them, gradually becoming less dense as they followed the game trail downhill. Vele could smell water in the air now, and the sound of running water grew stronger with each step. Her mind was racing with the implications of Wyatt's revelation. So when my ship was sabotaged, she began. Someone who knew about Genesis agents made sure you'd need one, Wyatt finished. Razor fangs are specifically mentioned in our threat assessment files. They're one of the few organic life forms that requires enhancement-level strength to defeat barehanded. But who would know enough to plan something like that? Wyatt gave her a pointed look. How many people knew about your mission, Commander, and how many of them had access to both Azuran military intelligence and Earth military history files? Vele felt her stomach drop as the implications hit her. The conspiracy she'd uncovered went deeper than just Azuran politics. Someone with connections to both their militaries had orchestrated this entire situation. They reached the river as the jungle's artificial day cycle began to dim. The canopy above glowed with bioluminescent plants, casting an eerie blue-green light over everything. The water was clear and fast-moving, obviously safe to drink, based on the various animal tracks along its banks. We should rest here, Wyatt said, setting down his pack. I want to put more distance between us and that razor fang, but traveling in the dark is asking for trouble. This place is defensible enough, and the water will mask our scent. Vele agreed, grateful for the chance to stop. The adrenaline from their various encounters was beginning to wear off, leaving her exhausted and sore. She found a relatively flat spot near the water's edge and began setting up her small shelter. Wyatt, she said as they prepared a simple meal from their ration kits. Thank you for saving my life, for trusting me with the truth about what you are. He glanced up from where he was purifying water tablets. You're welcome. But Vela, what I told you about the Genesis Project can't leave this planet. If the wrong people found out about enhanced humans, about what Earth is really capable of, it would destabilize everything, Vela finished. I understand. Your secret is safe with me. They ate in companionable silence, listening to the sounds of the alien jungle around them. As full darkness fell, the bioluminescent plants grew brighter, turning the forest into something magical and otherworldly. Strange creatures called out in the distance, their voices mixing with the constant whisper of wind through the leaves. Vele, Wyatt said eventually. Your turn. What's really in that data crystal you're carrying? And don't give me another vague answer about political conspiracies. After what happened today, I think I've earned some honesty. Vele stared into the glowing waters of the river, weighing her words carefully. She'd spent so long keeping secrets, being cautious about who to trust. But if she couldn't trust someone who'd literally torn apart a monster to protect her, who could she trust? 3 months ago, I was part of a joint military exercise with several allied species, she began. Nothing unusual, just routine war games. But during the exercise, I noticed some irregularities in our communications protocols. Messages being sent that weren't part of the exercise parameters. Data being accessed that had nothing to do with the training scenarios. She pulled the data crystal from her pack, holding it up, so it caught the bioluminescent light. I started investigating. What I found was a network of Azuran military officers and council members who were using these joint exercises to steal technological and military secrets from our allies. But that wasn't the worst part. What was the worst part? They were planning to use that stolen information to provoke conflicts between the allied species. Create wars that would weaken everyone except the Azuran Empire. The ultimate goal was to position us as the dominant galactic power by making sure everyone else destroyed each other. Wyatt let out a low whistle. That's ambitious and insane. Elder Thalos, the leader of the conspiracy, believes that Azurans are inherently superior to all other species. He sees the current galactic peace as weakness, thinks we should be ruling over everyone else rather than cooperating with them. Vela's voice hardened. When I tried to report what I'd found through normal channels, I discovered that Thalos had people throughout the military hierarchy. People who were willing to kill to keep this secret. So you decided to take it public yourself. The Galactic Council has provisions for whistleblowing in cases of war crimes or crimes against galactic peace. If I can get this data to Ambassador Ildrea at Nexus Station, she has the authority to convene an emergency tribunal. The evidence on this crystal is enough to bring down Thalos and his entire network. Wyatt turned the crystal over in his hands, studying it. And Thalos knows you have this. He knows I have something. I managed to escape Azuran space before his people could stop me, but obviously, they've been tracking me since. The sabotage of your ship proves they have operatives even out here in the frontier. Nexus Station is still 5 days away, even if we can find transportation, Wyatt said thoughtfully. That's a lot of time for them to try to stop us. I know, Vela said. If you want to back out, I'll understand. You didn't sign up for anything like this. Wyatt was quiet for a moment, then handed the crystal back to her. Funny thing about being enhanced, he said. It doesn't just make you stronger or faster. It makes you more aware of right and wrong, more committed to protecting people who can't protect themselves, more willing to fight impossible odds just because it's the right thing to do. He looked at her across the small fire they'd built. Besides, I'm curious to see what happens when an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. What do you mean? You've got evidence that could bring down a conspiracy spanning multiple species and military organizations. I'm a walking weapon that's not supposed to exist. Between the two of us, we might just be enough to change the galaxy. Vele felt something warm spread through her chest, not just gratitude, but something deeper. Trust, perhaps. Or hope. Thank you, Wyatt. I can't promise this will end well for either of us. Nothing worthwhile ever does, he replied. Now, get some rest. We start early tomorrow and we've still got a long way to go. As Vela settled into her shelter, she found herself looking at Wyatt with new eyes. The casual arrogance she'd initially attributed to his human nature now seemed like something entirely different. The confidence of someone who'd faced impossible challenges and survived. The scars on his hands and the careful way he moved spoke of battles fought and won against odds that would have killed lesser beings. She'd hired him as a simple escort, thinking of humans as barely civilized primitives, useful for menial tasks. Now, she found herself relying on someone who might be more dangerous than any weapon in the Azuran arsenal. It was a humbling realization, and one that made her question many of her people's assumptions about other species. The night passed peacefully, with only distant animal calls and the whisper of wind to break the silence. When dawn came, they broke camp quickly and resumed following the river downstream. The jungle gradually gave way to more open terrain as they descended from the highlands where they'd crashed. Settlement should be just around that bend, Wyatt said, consulting his scanner. The question is whether anyone there will be willing to help us. They rounded the curve of the river and saw their destination, a small outpost that looked like it had been carved directly into the hillside. Buildings of local stone and metal salvage clustered around a landing pad where several small aircraft sat. Smoke rose from chimneys, and Vel could see figures moving between the structures. "Looks peaceful enough," she observed. "Looks can be deceiving," Wyatt replied, but he didn't seem particularly concerned. "Let me do the talking initially. Frontier settlements can be suspicious of outsiders, especially Azuran military." They approached openly, hands visible and weapons secured. A human woman emerged from what looked like the main building, flanked by two men of different species. One appeared to be Colossian, the other, some kind of heavily modified cyborg. "Morning, travelers," the woman called out. "I'm Mayor Chen of Riverside Colony. You folks look like you've had a rough time." "Ship crash about 20 kilometers upriver," Wyatt replied. "We're looking for transport to Nexus Station." "The Nexus Station." The mayor raised an eyebrow. "That's a long way from here and expensive. You got credits to pay for passage." Vele stepped forward. "We can pay. It's urgent that we reach there as quickly as possible." Mayor Chen's eyes took in Vele's uniform and species, and her expression grew more serious. "Azuran military. Let me guess you're in some kind of trouble with your own people." "Something like that," Vele admitted. "Well, that's not uncommon out here. Half our residents are running from something." The mayor gestured toward the main building. "Come inside. We can discuss transportation over a meal. You both look like you could use some real food." The colony's main hall was warm and welcoming, filled with the scent of cooking food and the low murmur of conversation. Various species mingled freely, something that would have been unusual in Azuran space, but was apparently commonplace on the frontier. Over a meal of local protein and vegetables, Mayor Chen explained their options. "I've got a trader heading toward the core systems tomorrow. Captain Rodriguez usually makes a stop at Nexus Station. Problem is, his ship's not exactly military grade, and if you're expecting trouble—" "What kind of trouble might we expect?" Wyatt asked. "That depends on who's chasing you," the mayor replied. "We've had increased patrols from various military forces in the last few days. Azuran ships mostly, but also some others. They're being very polite, but they're definitely looking for something." Vale and Wyatt exchanged glances. Thalas's people were clearly closing in. "Captain Rodriguez is a good man," the mayor continued. "Fought in the border wars, lost his ship to pirates twice, but he's never lost a passenger. If you can convince him to take you, he'll get you where you need to go, or die trying." They found Captain Rodriguez in the colony's small cantina, a weathered human man with graying hair and scars that spoke of a violent past. He listened to their request without comment, occasionally sipping from a mug of something that smelled like industrial solvent. "Nexus Station," he said finally. "In a hurry. Being chased by Azuran military. And you're willing to pay premium rates." "That's correct," Vele said. Rodriguez studied them both for a long moment. "You know, I fought alongside Azurans in the border wars. Good soldiers, most of them. But I've also seen what happens when their high command decides someone's expendable." He set down his mug with a decisive thunk. "I'll take you. But if military ships start shooting at us, I reserve the right to dump you both out an airlock." "Understood," Wyatt said. "Good. We leave at dawn. My ship's the Maria Esperanza Docking Pad 3. Don't be late." They spent the rest of the day resupplying and resting. Vele found herself growing increasingly nervous as they prepared to leave Colaris. Once they were back in space, they'd be vulnerable to interception. Thalas had resources throughout this sector, and she had no doubt he'd try to stop them before they reached Nexus Station. That evening, as they sat in the colony's small observation deck, watching the stars emerge in the alien sky, Wyatt broke the comfortable silence. "Vel, there's something you should know about tomorrow. About what might happen if we encounter hostile ships." "What do you mean?" I told you about the Genesis project, about what Earth's military did to create enhanced soldiers. But I didn't tell you everything. He was quiet for a moment, choosing his words carefully. The enhancements weren't just physical. They also included certain technological integrations. Vele felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of integrations? Neural interfaces mostly. Cybernetic systems designed to enhance reaction time, improve tactical analysis, that sort of thing. But some of us received more extensive modifications. He held up his hand, and Vele saw what she'd missed before: thin, metallic lines running through his palm, almost like circuitry under the skin. I can interface directly with most ship systems, he continued. Given enough time and physical contact, I can control or override almost any computer system in known space. It's how I knew the Wanderer had been sabotaged so quickly. I could feel what had been done to her. You're a cyborg, Vele said, not sure how she felt about this revelation. Partly. The integration is so seamless that most scans don't detect it. But if we get into a fight tomorrow, if things go bad, I wanted you to know that I'm more than just a strong human with good reflexes. Vele nodded slowly. Every conversation with Wyatt seemed to reveal new layers of complexity, new reasons why humanity might be far more dangerous than anyone realized. Is there anything else I should know? Any other secrets you're carrying? Wyatt was quiet for a long moment. Just one, he said eventually. But that one will have to wait until we reach Nexus Station. Let's see if we survive that long first. The next morning dawned clear and bright. Captain Rodriguez's ship was larger than the Wanderer, a converted military transport that showed signs of extensive modification and repair. Rodriguez himself was already running through pre-flight checks when they arrived at the docking pad. Welcome aboard the Maria Esperanza, he said, without looking up from his console. Passenger quarters are Deck 2, Section C. We'll be traveling at commercial speeds to avoid attracting attention, so the journey to Nexus Station will take 4 days. Try not to cause any trouble. The Maria Esperanza lifted off smoothly, rising through Colaris's atmosphere and into the black of space. As they made the jump to FTL, Vele felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. They were finally off the planet, but now came the truly dangerous part of the journey. For the first 2 days, everything went smoothly. The ship's course took them through several minor systems, stopping occasionally at space stations to trade cargo and refuel. Vele spent most of her time reviewing the data crystal's contents, making sure everything was still intact, and planning what she would say to Ambassador Ildrea when they reached Nexus Station. Wyatt, meanwhile, seemed to spend his time exploring the ship. She often saw him in conversation with crew members or examining various systems. At first, she thought he was just restless, but she began to suspect he was doing something more purposeful, learning the ship's systems, perhaps preparing for trouble he expected to find. Trouble found them on the 3rd day. Vele was in the ship's small observation lounge when the alarms started sounding. Through the viewport, she could see the swirling colors of hyperspace beginning to collapse as they dropped back into normal space. Captain Rodriguez's voice echoed through the ship's communication system. All passengers remain in your quarters. We have a situation developing. Vele ignored the order and made her way to the bridge, where she found Rodriguez and his crew frantically working at their stations. Through the main view screen, she could see what had triggered the alarm: 3 Azuran military vessels in attack formation, blocking their path to the next jump point. Commander Vele, Rodriguez said without turning around. I think your friends have found us. The communications console crackled to life, and a familiar voice filled the bridge. Maria Esperanza, this is Elder Thalas of the Azuran Imperial Council. You will surrender the fugitive Vele immediately, or we will consider your vessel to be in violation of galactic peace accords. Vele felt her blood run cold. Thalas himself was here. That meant this wasn't just about stopping her. It was about making sure the truth never came to light. Captain Rodriguez, Thalas continued, you have 60 seconds to comply. After that, we will board your vessel by force. Rodriguez looked at Vela with a grim expression. Any suggestions, Commander? Because my ship's fast, but she's not faster than military cruisers. Before Vel could respond, Wyatt appeared on the bridge. He moved past her to the helm station, his hands hovering over the controls. Captain, he said, I need you to grant me emergency access to your ship's systems, full override capabilities. Rodriguez stared at him. Are you insane? I don't even know who you are. I'm someone who can get us out of this alive, Wyatt replied. But I need complete control of your ship's navigation engines and defensive systems. Right now. 30 seconds remaining, Thalas's voice announced. Rodriguez looked between Wyatt and the Azuran ships on his screen, then made a decision. His hands flew over the controls, entering authorization codes. Access granted. Try not to get us all killed. The moment the authorization went through Wyatt's hands, dropped to the helm controls. But instead of touching the physical interfaces, Vel saw those metallic lines in his skin begin to glow. He pressed his palms flat against the main control panel, and suddenly, every screen on the bridge was displaying data faster than any organic being could process. Hold on, Wyatt said, his voice strangely distant. This is going to get interesting. The Maria Esperanza suddenly accelerated, with a force that should have been impossible for a ship of her class. Vela was thrown back against a bulkhead as they shot forward directly toward the Azuran ships. What are you doing? Rodriguez shouted. You're flying us straight into them. But Wyatt wasn't flying the ship in any conventional sense. Vela could see now that the metallic lines in his skin were connected to every part of the control system, turning him into a living extension of the Maria Esperanza's computer core. His eyes had taken on the same glow she'd seen when he'd torn apart the Razorfang, and she realized she was witnessing another aspect of the Genesis Project's enhancements. The Azuran ships opened fire, their energy weapons lashing out toward the approaching freighter. But somehow, impossibly, Wyatt was predicting their targeting patterns. The Maria Esperanza jinked and weaved through the barrage with precision that no human pilot could have achieved, slipping between energy beams by mere meters. Impossible, Rodriguez breathed. No one flies like that. Nothing flies like that. They streaked between two of the Azuran ships close enough that Vela could see details on their hulls. The cruisers, caught off guard by the freighter's impossible maneuvers, collided with each other as they tried to track their target. One ship's engines erupted in a cascade of fire and debris. But Wyatt wasn't done. As they cleared the Azuran formation, he somehow managed to redirect the ship's cargo handling systems. Massive containers intended for legitimate trade goods ejected from the Maria Esperanza's cargo bay, creating a debris field that the remaining Azuran ships had to navigate around. Jump point in 10 seconds, Wyatt announced, his voice completely calm despite the chaos around them. The last thing Vela saw before they entered hyperspace was Elder Thalas's flagship trying to pursue them through the debris field, its hull sparking from impacts with the cargo containers. As soon as they were safely in hyperspace, Wyatt collapsed. His hands came away from the control panel, the metallic lines in his skin fading back to their normal appearance. Rodriguez and his crew stared at him in shock. "What the hell are you?" Rodriguez asked. Wyatt picked himself up, looking exhausted but unharmed. "Someone who's very glad your ship has robust computer systems, Captain. We should reach Nexus Station in about 18 hours, assuming Thalas doesn't have more ships waiting for us." Rodriguez shook his head in amazement. "In 40 years of flying, I've never seen anything like that. You didn't just pilot my ship, you became my ship." "The Genesis Project had a lot of experimental programs," Wyatt said simply. "Some turned out better than others." Over the next several hours, as they traveled through hyperspace toward Nexus Station, Vel found herself grappling with everything she'd learned about Wyatt, and by extension, about humanity as a whole. The more she discovered, the more she realized how wrong her people had been about Earth species. "Wyatt," she said as they sat in the ship's dining area, sharing what might be their last meal before reaching Nexus Station. "That last secret you mentioned, the one you were saving for Nexus Station. What is it?" He looked at her for a long moment, then reached into his jacket and pulled out a data pad. Before I tell you, I want you to understand something. Everything that's happened to us, the sabotage, the crash, even our meeting at Kara Station, none of it was coincidence. Vele felt her stomach drop. What do you mean? I mean, I was sent to find you, Commander. The mission brief is all in here. He handed her the data pad. 3 weeks ago, I was contacted by someone claiming to represent a coalition of concerned parties within multiple galactic governments. They provided me with intelligence about the conspiracy you've uncovered, about Elder Thalas's plans, and about a certain Azuran commander who was trying to expose him. Vele stared at the datapad, afraid to read what was on it. You've been working for someone else this entire time. Not working for, Wyatt corrected. Working with. The people who contacted me aren't interested in power or politics. They're interested in preventing a galactic war. Your data crystal contains evidence of war crimes, but my people have been gathering intelligence on Thalas and his network for months. He reached over and activated the datapad, showing her files that contain detailed intelligence on dozens of Azuran officials, military officers, and government bureaucrats. When combined with your data, this information is enough to not just stop Thalas, but to completely dismantle his organization and expose every species they've been manipulating. Who are your people? Vele asked, though she suspected she already knew the answer. A joint intelligence operation. Humans, Colossians, Tauri, even some Azurans who stayed loyal to the original peace treaties. All of us working together to prevent exactly the kind of war Thalas is trying to start. Vele scrolled through the files, each revelation more shocking than the last. The conspiracy went far beyond what she'd discovered on her own. It included members of multiple species governments, all working together to maintain a series of controlled conflicts that would benefit a small group of military-industrial interests. This is why the sabotage was done the way it was, she realized. Someone made sure I'd need a Genesis agent to survive. Someone wanted us to meet. Exactly. Though I have to admit, no one planned on us having to fight our way through quite so many predators. Vele looked up from the datapad, studying Wyatt's face. So everything between us, the trust, the camaraderie, even the... She paused, realizing she'd been about to say something she wasn't sure she was ready to put into words. The attraction, Wyatt finished gently. Vele, I may have been sent to help you, but everything that's happened between us has been real. I couldn't have faked caring about you even if I'd wanted to. The Genesis project enhanced a lot of things, but it didn't teach me how to pretend to fall in love. Vele felt her heart skip a beat. Fall in love? With a brilliant, brave Azuran commander who risked everything to save the galaxy from her own people's mistakes. How could I not? Before she could respond, Captain Rodriguez's voice came over the ship's communication system. All passengers to stations. We're dropping out of hyperspace. Nexus station dead ahead. They made their way to the observation deck as the Maria Esperanza emerged from hyperspace in the Nexus system. Ahead of them loomed one of the greatest achievements of galactic cooperation, a massive space station that served as neutral territory for all species, a place where diplomats, traders, and refugees could meet safely, regardless of their origins. But something was wrong. The station's normal traffic patterns were disrupted, and Vele could see military ships from multiple species forming a perimeter around the station. This doesn't look good, Wyatt observed. Rodriguez's voice crackled over the intercom again. Maria Esperanza to Nexus Control requesting docking clearance. Maria Esperanza, this is Nexus Control. Station is currently under quarantine protocols. No ships are permitted to dock without direct authorization from the Galactic Council Oversight Committee. That's not normal, Vele said. Nexus Station has open docking rights by treaty. Before anyone could respond, another voice came over the communication channel. Maria Esperanza, this is Elder Thalas. I know you are aboard that vessel, Commander Vele. You cannot reach the station while it is under quarantine, and my ships are already moving to intercept you. Surrender now, and no harm will come to your human friend or the courier crew. Vele looked at Wyatt, despair creeping into her voice. He's sealed off the station. Even if we get past his ships, we can't dock. Wyatt was studying the tactical display, his enhanced mind, calculating possibilities faster than she could follow. Maybe we don't need to dock, he said thoughtfully. What do you mean? Nexus Station has emergency protocols. If someone with proper authority broadcasts a distress signal with evidence of war crimes or imminent galactic threat, the station automatically opens all communication channels and begins transmitting everything on open frequencies that can't be jammed or blocked. But that would require someone with council-level authorization codes, Vele protested. Wyatt smiled. Good thing I know someone who has those codes. Before she could ask what he meant, the ship shook under weapons fire. Through the viewport, Vel could see Azuran ships closing in from multiple directions. They had minutes, maybe less, before Thalas's forces would be in position to destroy them. Captain Rodriguez, Wyatt called over the intercom. I need you to get us as close to Nexus Station as possible. Don't worry about the quarantine, just get us within transmission range. You're asking me to violate galactic law, Rodriguez replied. Captain Vel said, keying her own authorization codes into the communication system. This is Commander Vele of the Azuran Naval Command. I am hereby requisitioning your vessel under emergency military protocols for a mission vital to galactic security. There was a pause. Then Rodriguez laughed. Well, I always said I'd probably go out in a blaze of glory. All hands battle stations. We're making a run for the station. What followed was perhaps the most harrowing 10 minutes of Vele's life. The Maria Esperanza raced toward Nexus Station while Azuran cruisers fired everything they had at the small freighter. Rodriguez proved to be every bit as good a pilot as his reputation suggested, threading between energy beams and missile salvos with skill born of decades of experience in dangerous situations. But even his skill wouldn't have been enough without Wyatt. Once again, the enhanced human placed his hands on the ship's control systems, merging with the computer core to provide impossible precision in their evasive maneuvers. They were less than 1,000 kilometers from the station when disaster struck. A lucky shot from one of the Azuran ships penetrated the Maria Esperanza's shields, tearing through the hull and destroying the main communications array. Communications are down, Rodriguez reported. I can't transmit anything beyond short range. Then we'll have to get closer, Wyatt said grimly. But Elder Thalas's flagship was moving to block their path, its massive bulk positioned directly between them and the station. The cruiser's weapons were charging, preparing to deliver a killing blow. This is it, Rodriguez said quietly. It's been an honor flying with you both. Vele closed her eyes, clutching the data crystal that contained the evidence of Thalas's crimes. They'd come so far, sacrificed so much, and now it would all be for nothing. Then, Wyatt spoke, his voice carrying a strange electronic harmonic that made her eyes snap open. Actually, he said, I think our ride just arrived. Through the viewport, Vel saw something that made her heart soar. 3 ships were emerging from hyperspace in perfect formation, sleek vessels whose design she recognized immediately. Human ships, Earth military from the look of their hull configurations and weapon placements. Elder Thalas, a new voice, cut through the communication channels, speaking with a crisp Earth accent. This is Captain Maria Alvarez of the Earth Defense Force vessel Indomitable. You are in violation of multiple galactic treaties by attacking a civilian vessel in neutral space. Stand down immediately. Captain Alvarez, Thalas responded, This is an internal Azuran matter. You have no authority here. Actually, we do, Alvarez replied calmly. The Galactic Council emergency protocols give Earth military the authority to intervene in cases of imminent war crimes. And based on the intelligence we've been gathering, that's exactly what this is. The human ships moved with the same impossible precision Vele had seen Wyatt display, sliding between the Azuran vessels and the Maria Esperanza. Their weapons weren't firing yet, but they were clearly locked on target. Maria Esperanza, Captain Alvarez continued. This is Captain Alvarez. We're here to provide escort to Nexus Station. Please prepare for data transmission. I understand you have some information the galactic community needs to see. Wyatt, Vale said, staring at him. How did they know to come here? How did they know about us? Wyatt's smile was rueful. Remember, I told you there was an intelligence coalition. Earth's part of that coalition. I've been transmitting updates on our situation every time we've made hyperspace jumps. My people have been tracking this entire mission. You mean, the Genesis Project didn't just create enhanced soldiers, Vela. It created a network. We stay in contact, share information, coordinate when necessary. When the coalition realized how big Thalas's conspiracy really was, they decided it was time for Earth to stop hiding. As if to prove his point, the Indomitable moved with a grace that should have been impossible for a ship of its size, placing itself directly between Thalas's flagship and the Maria Esperanza. The message was clear: if Thalas wanted to continue his attack, he'd have to go through Earth's military to do it. This is a mistake, Thalas broadcast, his voice filled with rage. Humanity is not ready for this kind of responsibility. Your primitives barely evolved beyond your savage origins. Captain Alvarez's response was calm, professional, and absolutely deadly. Elder Thalas, in approximately 30 seconds, every communication channel in this system is going to broadcast evidence of your war crimes to the entire galactic community. You can either stand down and face justice, or you can try to fight 3 of Earth's most advanced warships with your handful of cruisers. I'll let you do the math on how that's likely to turn out. Vele was already uploading the data from her crystal to the Maria Esperanza's remaining communication systems. Wyatt, still connected to the ship's computers, was somehow amplifying the transmission, ensuring it would reach not just Nexus Station, but every ship and relay station in the system. Uploading now, Vele announced. All evidence of the conspiracy, Thalas's plans, everything. The transmission burst from the Maria Esperanza and was immediately picked up and rebroadcast by the human ships, creating a cascade effect that spread throughout the system. Within minutes, every screen on Nexus Station and every ship in the system would be seeing documented proof of the conspiracy that had nearly torn the galactic community apart. Thalas made his choice. His flagship's weapons powered up, targeting the Indomitable. The battle that followed was brief and decisive. Thalas's ships moved with the coordination and discipline one would expect from the Azuran military, but the human vessels fought with a precision that went beyond mere training. They moved like extensions of a single consciousness, covering each other's movements, anticipating enemy tactics, coordinating their fire with impossible accuracy. Vele watched in amazement as the supposedly primitive human ships systematically dismantled forces from one of the galaxy's most respected militaries. Each Earth vessel seemed to know exactly where its companions were, what they were doing, how to position itself for maximum effectiveness. "It's the Genesis agents, isn't it?" she said to Wyatt. "The ships have enhanced crews." "Not just enhanced," Wyatt replied. "Networked. When Genesis agents work together, we share tactical information directly. Each of those ships has at least one enhanced crew member providing that connection." Within minutes, 2 of Thalas's ships were dead in space, their engines destroyed and weapons offline. The third, Thalas's flagship, was attempting to retreat when Captain Alvarez's voice cut through the communication channels once more. "Elder Thalas, your ship has been disabled. Prepare to be boarded." "I will not be taken alive by inferior species," Thalas raged. "That's your choice," Alvarez replied. "But you will be taken." The Indomitable's boarding pods launched, cutting through space toward the crippled Azuran flagship. Vele knew that within minutes, Thalas and his co-conspirators would be in custody, their conspiracy exposed to the entire galaxy. "It's over," she said, hardly believing it. "The conspiracy, yes," Wyatt agreed. "But this is just the beginning of everything else." As if to emphasize his point, Nexus Station's communications array came online, broadcasting to the entire galactic community. Ambassador Ildrea's voice filled the system. "Citizens of the galactic community, What you have just witnessed is the exposure of a conspiracy that threatened not just the peace between our species, but the very foundation of our collaborative civilization. The evidence transmitted by Commander Vela of the Azuran Empire and her allies has revealed a network of corruption and warmongering that spans multiple species and governments. Vele felt tears running down her face, tears of relief, of exhaustion, and of hope. They had done it. The truth was out, and there would be no covering it up now. Commander Vela Wyatt. Captain Alvarez's voice came over the communication channel. Nexus Station has cleared you for immediate docking. Ambassador Ildrea is requesting an immediate debriefing, and the Galactic Council has been called into emergency session. As the Maria Esperanza approached Nexus Station's docking bays, Vele found herself standing close to Wyatt, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. Around them, the crew of Captain Rodriguez's freighter was celebrating their survival, but she felt strangely peaceful. "So what happens now?" she asked. "Now we tell our story," Wyatt replied. "We give testimony to the Council. We help them understand exactly how deep this conspiracy went, and what needs to be done to prevent it from happening again." And after that, Wyatt turned to look at her, and she saw something in his eyes that made her heart race. "After that, we figure out what comes next. Together, if you want." Vele thought about everything that had happened, the crash on Colaris, their flight through the jungle watching Wyatt tear apart a razor fang with his bare hands, the gradual revelation of secrets that changed everything she thought she knew about humanity. She thought about the way he'd trusted her with the truth about what he was, and how she'd come to see him not as a hired escort, or even as an enhanced weapon, but as someone she cared about deeply. "I'd like that," she said. As the Maria Esperanza settled into its docking clamp, Vele realized that while this particular crisis was over, they had fundamentally changed the balance of power in the galaxy. Earth was no longer hiding its capabilities, and the other species would have to adjust to the reality that humanity was far more than anyone had realized. But more than that, she'd changed. The Azuran commander, who had hired a human mercenary at Kara Station, no longer existed. In her place was someone who had seen beyond the prejudices of her species, someone who had learned that cooperation and trust between individuals could overcome even the most entrenched political conspiracies. "Commander Vele," Captain Rodriguez said, as they prepared to disembark. "It's been an honor having you aboard, both of you. I don't know what kind of future you two are heading toward, but if it's anything like the last few days, the galaxy's in for some interesting times." Vele smiled, taking Wyatt's hand as they walked down the gangplank onto Nexus Station. "I think you're right, Captain. Very interesting times indeed." As they made their way through the station's corridors toward the diplomatic sector, where Ambassador Ildrea was waiting, Vele reflected on how much had changed in just a few days. She'd started this journey as a reluctant whistleblower, trying to prevent a war. She was ending it as part of something larger, a new kind of cooperation between species based, not on political expediency, but on personal trust and shared values. The data crystal that had nearly cost them their lives was now in the hands of the Galactic Council. But the real victory wasn't just in exposing Thalas's conspiracy. It was in proving that individuals from different species could overcome prejudice and mistrust to work together towards something greater than themselves. As they approached the council chambers where their testimony would help reshape the galactic political landscape, Vale looked at Wyatt, the enhanced human, who had become so much more than she'd ever expected, and smiled. The galaxy was about to learn what she had discovered in the jungles of Colaris, that sometimes the most powerful weapons were trust, cooperation, and the simple decision to see other beings not as alien threats, but as potential allies and friends. And sometimes, if you were very fortunate, as something even more precious than that. The doors to the council chambers opened, and together they walked forward into an uncertain but hopeful future, carrying with them the truth that would help heal the wounds in the galactic community and perhaps create something better than what had come before. Behind them, The stars shone through Nexus Station's massive viewports, silent witnesses to the choices that had been made and the possibilities that lay ahead. In the distance, Earth's ships maintained their vigilant patrol, no longer hiding what they were, but standing openly as guardians of a peace that had been nearly shattered by prejudice and conspiracy. It was a new galaxy now, one where a blue-scaled Azuran commander and an enhanced human soldier could stand together as equals partners in both professional duty and personal affection. And in the end, Vela thought that might be the most important change of all.